Chapter 1: The Long March to a West Wing Corner Office. One attraction of being National Security Advisor is the sheer multiplicity and the volume of challenges that confront you. If you don't like turmoil, uncertainty, and risk, all while being constantly overwhelmed with information, decisions to make, and the sheer amount of work, and then driven by international and domestic personality and ego conflicts beyond description, try something else. It is exhilarating, but it is nearly impossible to explain to outsiders how the pieces fit together, which they often don't in any coherent way. I cannot offer a comprehensive theory of a Trump administration's transformation because none is possible. Washington's conventional wisdom on Trump's trajectory, however, is wrong. This received truth, attractive to the intellectual lazy, is that Trump was always bizarre, but in his first 15 months, uncertain in his new place and held in check by an nexus of adults, he hesitated to act. As time passed, however, Trump became more certain of himself. The axis of adults departed, things fell apart, and Trump was surrounded only by yes-men. Pieces of this hypothesis are true, but the overall picture is simplistic. The excess of adults in many respects caused enduring problems not because they successfully managed Trump. As the high-minded, inept description I picked up from the French for those who see themselves as our moral betters have it. But because they did precisely the opposite. They did not do nearly enough to establish order, and what they did do was so transparently self-serving and so publicly dismissive of many of Trump's very clear goals, whether worthy or unworthy, that they fed Trump's already suspicious mindset, making it harder for those who came later to have legitimate policy exchanges with the president. I have long felt that the role of the National Security Advisor was to ensure that the President understood what options were open to him for any given decision he needed to make, and then to ensure that this decision was carried out by the pertinent bureaucracies. The National Security Council process was certain to be different for different presidents, but these were the critical objectives of what the process should achieve, because however the excess of adults had served Trump so poorly, he second-guessed the people's motives, saw conspiracies behind rocks, and reminded astoundingly uninformed on how to run the White House, let alone the huge federal government. The excess of adults is not entirely responsible for his mindset. Trump is Trump. I came to understand that he believed he could run the executive branch and establish national security policies on the instinct, relying on personal relationships with foreign leaders and with made-for-television showmanship always top of mind. Now, instinct, personal relations, and showmanship are elements of any president's repertoire, but they are not all of it by a long stretch. Analysis, planning, intellectual discipline, and rigor, evaluation of results, course corrections, and the like are the blocking and tackling of presidential decision-making, the unglamorous side of the job. Appearance takes you only so far. In institutional terms, therefore, it is undeniable that Trump's transition and opening year plus were botched irretrievably. Processes that should have immediately become second nature, especially for that many Trump advisors with no prior service even in junior executive branch positions, never happened. Trump and most of his team never read the government's operator's manual, perhaps not realizing doing so wouldn't automatically make them members of the deep state. I entered the existing chaos, seeing problems that could have been resolved in the administration the first 100 days, if not before. Constant personnel turnover obviously did not help, nor did the White House Hobbesian Bedum Omnium contra omnes war of all against all. It may be a bit much to say that Hobbes' descriptions of human existence as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short accurately described life in the White House, but by the end of their tenures, many key advisors would have leaned toward it. As I explained in my book, surrender is not an option. My approach to accomplishing things in the government has always been to absorb as much as possible about the bureaucracies where I served. State Justice, the United States Agency for International Development, so I could more readily accomplish my objectives. My goal was not to get a membership card, but to get a driver's license. That thinking was not common at the Trump White House. In early visits to the West Wings, the differences between this presidency and the previous ones I had served were stunning. What happened on one day on a particular issue often had a little resemblance to what happened the next day or the day after. Few seem to realize it, care about it, or have any interest in fixing it. And it wasn't going to get much better, which is depressing but inescapable conclusion I reached only after I had joined the administration. Former Nevada Senator Paul Laxalt, a mentor of mine, liked to say, in politics, there are no immaculate conceptions. This insight powerfully explains appointments to very senior executive branch positions. Despite the frequency of press lines like, I was very surprised when President Smith called me. Such impressions of innocence are invariably only carefully related to the truth, and at no point is the competition for high-level jobs more intense than during the presidential transition, a U.S. invention that has become increasingly elaborate in recent decades. Transition teams provide good case studies for graduate business schools on how not to do business. They exist for a fixed fleeting period from the election to the inauguration and then disappear forever. They are overwhelmed by hurricanes of incoming information and disinformation, complex, often competing strategy and policy analysis, many consequential personal decisions for the real government, and media and interest group scrutiny and pressure. Undeniably, some transitions are better than others. How they unfold reveals much about the administration to come. Richard Nixon's 1968-69 transition was the first example of a contemporary transitions, with a careful analysis of each major executive branch agency. Ronald Reagan's in 1980-81 was a landmark in adhering to maximum personal aid policy, intently focused on picking people who would adhere to Reagan's platform, and Donald Trump's 2016-17 transition was Donald Trump's. I spent the election night, November 8, 9, in Fox News Manhattan studios, waiting to comment on air about the next president's foreign policy priorities, which everyone expected would occur in the 10 p.m. hour just after Hillary Clinton was declared the winner. I finally went on the air around 3 o'clock the next morning. So much for advance of planning, not only for at Fox but also in the camp of the president-elect. Few observers believed Trump would win, and as with the Robert Doe's failed 1996 campaign against Bill Clinton, Trump's pre-election preparations were modest, reflecting the impending doom. In comparison with Hillary's operation, which resembled a larger army on a certain march toward power, Trump's seemed staffed by a few hardy souls with time on their hands. His unexpected victory, therefore, caught his campaign unready, resulting in immediate turf fights with the transition volunteers and scrapping of almost all its pre-election product. Starting over on November 9 was hardly auspicious, especially with the bulk of transition staff in Washington and Trump and his closest aides at Trump Tower in Manhattan. Trump didn't understand much of what the huge federal behemoth did before he won, and he didn't acquire much, if any, greater awareness during the transition, which did not bode well for his performance in office. I played an insignificant part in Trump's campaign except for one meeting with the candidate on Friday morning, September 23, at Trump Tower, 3 days before his first debate with Clinton. Hillary and Bill were a year ahead of me at Yale Law School, so in addition to discussing national security, I offered Trump my thoughts on how Hillary would perform. Well prepared and scripted, following her game plan no matter what. She hadn't changed in over 40 years. Trump did the most of the talking, as in our first meeting in 2014 before his candidacy. As we concluded, he said, "You know, your views and mine are actually very close, very close." At that point, I was a widely engaged senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, Fox News contributor, a regular on the speaking circuit of counsel at a major law firm, member of corporate boards, senior advisor to a global private equity firm, and author of an opinion article at the rate of about one a week. In late 2013, I formed a PAC and a super PAC to aid House and Senate candidates who believed in a strong U.S. national security policy, distributing hundreds of thousands of dollars directly to candidates and spending millions in independent expenditures in the 2014 and 2016 campaigns, and preparing to do so against in 2018. I had plenty to do, but I had also served in the last 3 Republican administrations, and international relations had fascinated me since my days at Yale College. I was ready to go in again. New threats and opportunities were coming at us rapidly, and 8 years of Barack Obama meant that there was much to repair. I had thought long and hard about America's national security in the tempestuous world, Russia and China at the strategic level, Iran, North Korea, and other rogue nuclear weapons aspirants, the swirling threats of radical Islamist terrorism in tumultuous Middle East, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq and Yemen, Afghanistan and beyond, and the threats in our own hemisphere like Cuba, Venezuela and Nicaragua. While foreign policy labels are unhelpful except to the intellectually lazy, if pressed, I like to say my policy was pro-American. I followed Adam Smith on economics, Edmund Burke on society, the Federalist Papers on government, and the merger of Dean Axon and John Foster Dulles on national security. My first political campaigning was in 1964 on behalf of Barry Goldwater.